Throughout our lives is one relationship that we invariably come back to time and again. It impacts our family life, our professional life, and very often our romantic outlook. Whatever angle you look at it from, how you feel about money could be one of the most defining relationships of your life. Loretta Kennedy is an accredited trauma of money practitioner, and she joins us in Money Talks today to unpack the many ways our money mindset can impact our finances. Loretta, how did you end up in such an interesting line of work?
What first of all really happened for me was I ended up discovering that I wanted to start a business. And when I went into that, I discovered that I had all of these things, all of these old kind of subconscious beliefs that were tripping me up. And I could not get off the starter block. And every time I tried to get off the starter block, like something just would come to block me or to knock me or to sidetrack me. And it was then really, I guess, that I discovered that, oh, there's something deeper going on here because I can follow the strategy. I could read the book and do everything that's in the book, but something else is blocking me. Something else is preventing me from actually really getting going on what I want to get going on. And that was when I really thought, gosh, I really need to go into this for myself because if I want to set up a business and if I want to have a successful business, I need to get over myself and I need to get over this kind of stuff. And some of the common stuff that I was doing was, and I see this a lot in my own clients, it's called like money avoidance is one of these behaviors that we have. So one of the things that how that shows up is, where I nearly have a fear of like invoicing people, asking for the payment. I'd be more than happy to do the work, more than happy to do all the deliveries, more than happy to overextend myself nearly. But then when it came to following up, like closing that end of the bargain,
Yes.
then I would find that I would just be in this like stuck, almost like a freeze state. And we know that we have these trauma responses. So you've got your fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. So I'd nearly be in a freeze state or a fawn state where you're like, oh, don't worry about it. Like, just pay me whenever you have it. It's grand. Don't worry about it. Like minimizing your own need and putting somebody else's needs ahead of you.
Money avoidance, was that the main block showing up for you?
That was the main one for me. And I would see that a lot in like the clients that I work with, some money avoiders. And then also I'd see a lot of money status seekers. So
Yes.
these are people who would see nearly like that their net worth equates with like how worthy they are in life in general. And I'd see a lot of people like really minimizing what they want and their own needs, and particularly around money, and not just money, but even around things like rest. How, there's this nearly attitude to you just, you plow on and you just keep going at all costs, even if your health suffers, even if you're not able, you just keep going. And that nearly like forgetting about that you actually have a body, that you have a physical vessel that needs looking after, that needs caring, and it needs attention. So a lot of the work I would do would be around really helping women identify, where they're at, like what's their nervous system like, and if they are feeling this mad urge to go out like and spend money, what's that about? Where else in their life is there that deficit, that gap? So why do they feel like that they need to fill it up with buying stuff, with consumerism? Is there some other way that they can meet that need for themselves without it always having to be something really extractive, like something like shopping?
Mm.
And sometimes it could be something like you just need to go for a walk, or what would it be like to go outside and take a really beautiful deep breath of fresh air? Or to just spend some time in the garden, like even just like smell a flower, like do something that's really nourishing, that isn't extractive, something that's regenerative, something that is actually good for your health, not just about always like giving, not always, having to buy something and bring in more junk into your house. I mean, I've absolutely no problem with like, if you need something, of course, absolutely go out and buy it, go out and get it. But it's about really looking at but the why behind your buy. And that's a big piece of the work that I would do. What's the why behind your buy?
Blocks that you speak of, so
Mm,
money avoidance, money status signaling, or status symbols, and I imagine money scarcity is in there as well.
yes.
Do they all stem from childhood?
A lot of them would start in childhood, but then a lot of it is also, if we look at, anybody born in Ireland, if we look at the epigenetics piece of what's handed down in our DNA, I mean, so many of us, our ancestors, lived, or some didn't live through a famine. So we carry that very much so in our DNA, that absolute fear of, destitution, that terror of we could be put off our land, we could be starving, we could be starved, and have no control and no power over it. And you see that a lot in people like descendants from, if you've been colonized, if you're a country that's been colonized and you've lost everything. You've lost your land, you've lost your language, you've lost your way of earning a livelihood, you've lost your right to even, harvest the food that's on the land around you or fish the rivers or the seas that are around you. Then that goes very, very deep as well around, like, do you have permission to do this? Do you have permission to take this? Do you have permission? So there's a big piece around the permission and who gives you permission. And do you have to seek permission from somebody else all the time? Or can you give yourself that permission to tend to yourself and to look after your own needs? I think that can be a really big piece. A lot of the people who I work with, they're nearly afraid or they feel like that they have to ask for permission, whether it's to eat or to take a break, to take a rest, like to take a nap. This idea that, like, oh my gosh, you could be so exhausted, but you just keep on going. Even if you have half an hour that you could close your eyes, no, you can't do that because that's a sign of laziness. That, you could be working, you could be doing something productive instead of that. It's
Yes.
nearly like seeing like this idea of like taking rest. It's like opting out. It's that all of a sudden you're lazy or you're not contributing to society. Whereas actually, maybe that's what you really need to do. Maybe you do need to take a nap, or maybe you just need to rest or go outside or take a deep breath of oxygen,
Hmm.
or just to do something for your nervous system, to soothe your nervous system, or to nourish your physical body, or to nourish your brain.
Yes.
But I think we've been set into this kind of mode nearly of like, no, no, it's do, do, do. We're not. What is it they say? We're not human beings. We're human doers. That you just have to keep doing, even if you're not feeling well. You have to plow through. Keep going, just to plow through all the time.
Yeah. I'm very interested in the idea of what a session looks like with you. So if I
Mm,
was to come to you and you
yes.
and you wanted to kind of unearth or discover my money blocks, what kind of
Mm,
questions would you ask? Now I know there's probably plenty of questions and plenty of
yeah.
sessions, but what would some of the earlier ones be?
I get a sense of like where you're coming from. So it could be questions. So some of the questions I would typically ask would be like, what was the tone of your home where you grew up? What was that like in relation to money? And that's usually a really, really good, that paints a really big picture. What was the tone of your home like? And if somebody is answering like, "Oh my God, it was just like walking on eggshells," we were terrified because it was never enough. We didn't know if there'd be food in the house. We didn't know if I hate, or people would say, "I hated asking for money for school books. I hated like back to school time because I just knew that it was going to be a really stressful time." So questions around the tone of your home. What was it like growing up for you? Some of the really interesting questions and the responses I get would be in relation to questions like, "What's your earliest money memory?" And
Yes.
what's your saddest money memory? And what's your happiest money memory?
Okay.
And that those are really charged questions. Usually there's a big emotional release when I ask those questions. What's your earliest money memory? What's your happiest money memory? And a lot of people can't find a happy money memory.
Yes.
And then they feel there's something wrong with them because they can't find one. And I have to really reassure people that there is no right or wrong answer here. This is your own experience. So, whatever your experience is, that is your experience. And to honor that and to not allow somebody else's experience to cloud yours or to feel like, you discount your experience because it wasn't the same experience that other people had.
How did your
And
own
it's a really big
relationship change with money, Loretta? Like when you did the work on
mm.
yourself and you acknowledged that there was some money avoidance there and you delved deeper into it, how did your own relationship change with money in all the ways that you met with it?
Mm. Well, I had to get really, really honest with myself. And plus, I'm married, I've got 3 kids as well. So I had to get really, really honest. And I'd started a business. I'd started my first business. So I think it was really when I was going into selling my first company that it all became like, whoa, I've grown this business and now and now I want to sell it. And it felt like, oh my God, I'm selling a child of mine that I have, held its hand and, had lost all the sleep and had all the big dreams and the big vision about like what's going to happen in this child's life. And then to have to put a price on it, I found that so difficult. So difficult,
Yes.
and had to really look. And like, of course, I mean, there are formulas and all of that where you can go through, like, how do you price a company? Like, how, and then how do you negotiate for that price and to honor it? I was very lucky in that, like, I found the right buyer as well at the right time. And I'd worked really hard on creating a company that was really tight and really lock solid, and financially, that it was up to date with everything. And that was really important, I think, because I think sometimes people can go into business and they can be very sloppy
Mm.
and not really realize how it has to be really copper fastened, that you need to be doing everything right. You need to have your accountant, you need to be filing all of your tax returns, you need to be, if you're registered for VAT, like, you need to be doing all of those things.
Yes.
Whereas I see so many people and they're just like, oh, she will just wing it. It's like, no, you can't just wing it, because you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what's going to happen. Like, I had no idea when I started my company that she was going to grow up into being this like big girl,
Mm.
that, and become this fully self-actualized version of themselves.
I
I had
think we should
no
let people
idea.
know what the business was. So it was a food business. You might give a little
Yeah.
explainer there.
So was Mama Bear Foods was my company, and I'm delighted now to see it doing so well. And it just blows my mind. And I think this is a big thing as well. The people forget that you can have this idea or you can have this dream about it. Like, I mean, it's not that I was dreaming about setting up a tomato ketchup company, but I had three kids and, they loved tomato ketchup. And I saw there was a gap in the market. And I'd never done a business degree. I hadn't even done home economics. But I was like, okay, there's a gap here. Like, I want to buy something and it's not out there. So if it's not out there, I'm going to make it myself. So that's what I did. I was like, right, I'm going to start nearly reverse engineer like this recipe so that I've got like the nutritional analysis that I would like for my own kids. I don't want a load of refined sugar in it and I want really clean ingredients. So I reverse engineered that recipe and got in help, like, to help me reverse engineer it. And then we went to work.
Hmm.
I started making it myself in my own kitchen here in Cork. And then after that, I went to an incubator kitchen. And then after that, I outsourced the manufacturing and started getting my first contracts in, which was so exciting. And then having to price it and to really look at, and I did pass maths, for my junior cert and for my leaving cert. So I had this whole piece around, I'm not good at maths.
Mm.
Like, how could I possibly be starting a business when I did pass maths?
Let's go back then to the selling of the business because this is
Mm,
interesting to me. You did the work, you accepted
yeah,
there was money avoidance there, you had to put a price
I had to
on
put
the
a price on
business.
it.
Do you
Mm.
think, had you not have done that work on yourself, that you might have ultimately got a lower price for your business?
The sale would not have happened. I would have completely self-sabotaged that, because I would have felt like, who am I to even be doing this? I can see 100 ways how I just wouldn't have even followed up with the process. I would have probably subconsciously left a lot of loose threads,
Yeah.
because there would have been a part of me that just felt like, who are you to be doing this? This isn't what you do.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why would you be worthy of like selling a company? What the hell? Like, this isn't what you do in your day to day. So I think I would have deliberately or subconsciously, I would have put in, there would have been behaviors there that I would have done and not really had much awareness around, that would have made sure that it just didn't happen with the ease with which it did happen.
Mm.
And it happened very easily. And partially that was because I found the right buyer and they were really on board and they really wanted the company. And then they kept me on afterwards as well. We did a beautiful handover. So they kept me on as a consultant afterwards. So it all worked out really well.
You've touched on it, on lots of different mindsets that might be like
Mm,
unhealthy or unhelpful, but I feel the common thread that I'm hearing through all of them has to do with self-worth.
yes.
And I wonder, it might be a bit reductive. Do you think your self-worth is ultimately your net worth?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I don't. I really don't. I know a lot of people would think that. They would think, well, how much money I make for my job, that's how worthy I am.
Mm.
And I need to be making like 100 grand, or I need to be making 50 grand. And if I'm not making that, then I'm not worthy, or I'm not as worthy as my next door neighbor who's on, six, seven, eight figures. And I think there is that really big comparison piece. And a lot of people would feel, and like a lot of the people who would come to work with me would really always be comparing themselves with like what their neighbors are making or what their friends are making. And we know it's not true, because you could just end up in a really great job that pays very, very well. But then you could be let go in the morning. And then what happens to your self-worth if that happens? Do
Yes.
you lose everything? Do you lose all of your identity with that? Do you lose all of the great achievements that you've had up to that point? Or do they cancel each other out afterwards? And that can happen with people where they lose their sense of themselves, that anchor that is themselves, like who they are underneath it all. That
Hmm.
can get really, really lost and really, really clouded. And I find that a lot. A lot of people would associate how much they're making or their job. It's such a big part of their identity
Yes.
that when you take that away, they're almost like free floating and they don't know how to anchor themselves because it's such a big, big piece of their identity.
Yes. So you have to know who you are without your
Have to know.
job and without your bank
Yeah.
balance.
Without all of those add-ons. I think it's really, really important. Who are you underneath it all? When you go to bed at night, who is that person?
Yes.
You know?
Very broke person.
Yeah.
um, but tell me, how is it possible to actually rewrite your money story or, undo these blocks? Like, how much work does one need to do to get
I
through
think
them?
I think once you start on it, and then you start to see, okay, wow, I thought this was like a done, this was like a foregone conclusion that things would. I hear a lot of people speaking in absolutes a lot of the time. They say like, oh, I'm always like this, or this always happens to me, or it always happens. Then when you start saying, okay, well, is there something that you could do to change that always to a sometimes or a frequently? And then if you wanted to become a this doesn't happen to me anymore, what kind of behaviors do you need to make to do that?
Yes.
So a lot of the things now I would have found with particularly entrepreneurs would be around, like, say, pricing their products or pricing their services. And now I work as a coach, and it was a really big piece for me as well. Like, how do you put a price on your service? How do you put a price on that? And then and have somebody then come in and maybe like want to get a discount or start asking for a discount or asking for like a knockdown price or saying, gosh, you're very expensive, aren't you? Or somebody else, I could get that from somebody else, and they're half that price. How do you stand firm in your pricing?
Mm,
It's a really, really big piece, if you're negotiating something, because I think a lot of people will come in and they'll really feel like that they want to get the discount, or that, they'll try and they maybe don't acknowledge like the amount of experience that you have, or the amount of, time you've put in, or the amount of qualifications you have, or the amount of actually being at the coal face that you've done.
absolutely.
And people can really discount that themselves when they're going in to negotiate, whether it's for a contract or whether it's for a piece of work for themselves. They can
Yeah.
really discount the amount of work, or the experience that they have in their bones and their blood. And I say that a lot of the time. Like, the experience you have, it's not just you yourself in this lifetime, it's like what came before. So your ancestors' experience as well. Like everything that they weathered, everything that they came through, you have also come through because you're here. So to not discount that,
Mhm.
so to really make them proud as well, that you stand firm and you stand tall, because people will always want to discount. People will always try and, weasel in and get some kind of
Yeah.
a lot of people will, and it's a big generalization to say people will, but a lot of people will.
No, I think you're so right because we've done so many pieces in the Irish Independent Money section where we chat to
Mm,
entrepreneurs who have a lot of skin in the game, who've been around for a long time about the lessons they've learned, and that comes up
yeah,
so often where it
yeah,
took them a long time to value themselves and their service and say no, I can't give you a discount, and no, this is the price, and
yeah,
just to stand firm. And the big learning curve for them was that it didn't dilute the brand. It didn't,
yeah.
if anything, it
Mm,
actually brought more people their way because they had
yes,
that inherent sense of value.
yeah. Or the idea that like you'll do it for free,
Yes. Yes, that came up a lot as well, actually. And that
Mm,
does come up a lot.
it does, yeah.
So tell me, Loretta, finally, I mean, I guess this kind of like the state we all want to get to, I guess, is abundance mindset, as it's often spoken of in like
Mm.
in this space. Or is that where we want to live?
I think it's a question to ask yourself. I mean, do you want to live with ease? Do you want to go to sleep at night where you feel like, okay? And I mean, it can sound like such a, It's nearly like a card at this point, like, but gratitude. Like, what are you grateful for? Like going to bed at night and even like listing 5 things that you're grateful for. Or when you wake up in the morning, like, can you find 5 things that you're grateful for? Well, even maybe it's that, God, there's a blue sky out there today.
Yeah.
I can take in a deep breath of air and it's not polluted. I've got water that I can drink. I've access to healthcare. I've access to good food, nutritious food. I'm healthy. My kids are healthy. My partner is healthy. I live in a country where I can go out, I can be gay, I can work. Like, to really look at the different things that you have that you could actually be grateful for. And I think people can sometimes really miss that. We're always like looking for the next thing, always looking for the next thing. And there's that urgency that's often put in society, and it's a fake sense of urgency that's put in place to dysregulate us, to get us always nearly feeling like, oh, I need to be buying, I need to be eating, I need to be doing, I need to be getting something. What would it be like to actually just sit in your body, sit in your own skin, or rest in your skin, without this feeling that you always have to be like consuming or getting out there or buying something or doing something? What does that feel like in your body? And that can be a really good question to ask yourself, to notice if there's any like jangliness or any urgency within your system. And if there is, where does that come from? And is that yours? Or was that put on you as a child? Like when you were a child, were you told, like, oh, look at you sitting down there, would you get up and give us a hand? Or like, what stories did you learn as you were growing up as a child? What were your stories around rest? What were your stories around, consuming? What were your stories around work? What were your stories around being a man in the world? What were your stories around being a woman in this world? What were your stories around being a child in this world? What did you learn as you were growing up? And then what did you internalize? What did you make your story that maybe wasn't your story, that was put on you? So these are all the questions that I would really ask, that we go into, and to really kind of uncover, well, what is at the root of all of this?
Yes.
Who are you? And like, whose story is it really? Is it your story? And is it true? Or did somebody put that on you?
That's fantastic. We spend a lot of time on this podcast talking about how to save more, how to earn more, how to be more. So there's
Mm,
some nice, thoughtful questions. Thank you
good.
so much, Loretta.
You're so welcome. My pleasure. Thank you.